IVM.
कब तक गिने हम धड़कने, दिल जैसे धड़के धड़कने दो, क्यों है कोई आग दबी, शोला जो भड़के भड़कने दो. What shola and what aag are we talking about? This song was written by Javed Akhtar. But what's that got to do with the Constitution of India? Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Priya Mirza, and this is a podcast about the Constitution of India where we look at what is fundamental to us: our lives, our privacy, our freedom, and the things that really matter. In the last episode, we saw how labor can be differently defined, and intellectual property rights are one dimension of labor, which is in fact capitalized upon. Intellectual property rights are rights over creations of the mind. Artistic work, literary work, artists, poets, singers are creative geniuses and granted rights to what they create. But isn't everything a creation of the mind and body? Like babies. But bodily labors, especially sexual ones such as bar dancing, sex work, and commercial surrogacy, are devalued and morally regulated. So while Ramdhari Singh Dinkar, the member of parliament and poet, persuaded parliament to pass the 1957 Copyright Act, others have to die, literally, to be recognized. In the last episode, we looked at tort law under India's Motor Vehicle Act 1988. And our first story today continues where we left off in the last one. Renu Agarwal, a mother, a wife, was killed in a road accident, and her husband filed for compensation for her services that her family no longer had. As a housewife, Renu's income wasn't so much from the few odd jobs she did. But did that mean she didn't do other work? In this landmark judgment in 2010, Justice Ashok Kumar Ganguly of the Supreme Court noted that it is virtually impossible to measure in terms of money the loss of personal care and attention suffered by the husband and children on the demise of the housewife. But he also noted it's not that housewives don't work. It's just that it is invisible. So, for example, when the census is carried out, domestic work like cooking, washing dishes, looking after children, fetching water has been categorized as, now hear this out, non-work. Non-work. How can work be non-work? But it gets worse. Domestic work is equated with the work of beggars, sex workers, and prisoners. So, domestic work is not just invisible, but wrongly categorized with other kinds of labor like begging. Okay, our second story today is about Ram Lakhan and the money that he made from begging. Rupees 47. That's right, 47 rupees. So the year is 2006, and one fine morning, Ram Lakhan, a beggar, is begging at the railway crossing at Rampura, Delhi. Until there is an anti-begging raid. And there are witnesses, policemen's testimonies that Ram Lakhan was indeed begging. And he's dragged off to a detention center. What? So, a little bit of history. After India became independent, the state of Bombay passed the Bombay Prevention of Begging Act 1959. And this was extended to about 20 other states, including Delhi, which criminalized begging. But what is begging? I beg to ask. The law defines begging as soliciting or receiving alms in a public place, whether or not under any pretense such as singing, dancing, fortune telling, performing, or selling anything. Okay, so broadly, what's the gist? The gist is soliciting alms. So broadly, soliciting alms. Now, where have I heard that before? Go listen to the episode on sex work to find out more. So soliciting alms in this case is criminal, but that's not all. Even if you aren't soliciting To quote, having no visible means of subsistence and wandering about, which as makes it likely that the person doing so exists by soliciting or receiving alms. Right. So, if it looks like I may beg, and if I look poor and wandering around before I actually beg, is also a crime. So, what happens to those found begging? They are taken off the streets, and the law requires them to be sent to detention centers. Persons found begging for the first time may be detained for at least 1 year, which could extend to 3 years, and second time offenders faced a mandatory detention period of 10 years. And so could people dependent upon the beggar like family. So, children above the age of 5 as well, bye bye, off to the detention center. Oh God. So, wandering around, being a vagabond? No, no, not in our lovely cities with gated societies, with security. No, no beggars around. Commonwealth Games? Foreigners coming to see New Delhi? Off. Hatao, hatao. Scrape the beggars off the streets. Chalo, chalo. Off to prison. Let's go. But what about charities and philanthropic trusts who also take donations and petition? Oh, right. But they don't look dirty and they aren't on the streets, right? So charities are legitimate and authorized charities. Therefore, not everyone who collects alms for the needy is a beggar, according to the act. Right. And with that, we go to Javed Akhtar. Javed Akhtar, celebrated poet, songwriter. In his capacity as Rajya Sabha Member of Parliament in 2012, made a passionate speech not about poetry but about amending copyright law. So, under Indian copyright law, following a major judgment in 1977, producers who commissioned the creation of musical or literary works for their films were granted the first ownership of copyright in those works. Because the logic was that since it were producers who were paying musicians, songwriters, etc. to create music and lyrics for films, the product would necessarily belong to the producer and not the composer or lyricist. जिसका खेत उसकी फसल kind of argument. ठीक है समझ में आ रहा है. So authorship, ownership of songs was contested, and the question was, who is really the owner of that work? Is it the person who's investing and putting their money into it? Who really owns that lovely A.R. Rahman song you love to listen to? Is it the producer? Is it the composer? Or is it the performer? And what about the proceeds of, say, a public performance? And ringtones? And the million other users of songs? In a major battle against music producers and music labels, Javed Akhtar successfully lobbied for a share of royalties over the compositions and lyrics, from ringtones to performances and the other ways in which songs are used and performed. Okay, let's get back to Ram Lakhan. Uska kya hua? Was soliciting alms, whose poverty pushed him to beg, but was criminalized for that. In Harsh Mandar versus Union of India 2018, the Delhi High Court held that the Begging Act violated our constitution, and most fundamentally that our constitution guarantees us equality before law, that's Article 14, and the right to life and personal liberty, and the court struck down certain provisions of that on the grounds that it's the state's responsibility to provide the basic necessities for survival, food, clothing, shelter to all its citizens, and to penalize people who are doing nothing more than trying their best to survive is pure evil. Excellent. And what did Javed Akhtar do? In Parliament, Javed Akhtar explained his reasons behind the demand for mandatory royalty sharing. He said, "Let us be fair. If the song is taken out of the film and is used as a ringtone or used in a hotel, restaurant, aircraft, then royalty should come and we should have our share of royalty." That's regal. And despite stiff resistance from the music industry, film producers Akhtar's recommendations were enacted into law as part of the Copyright Amendment Act 2012. Phew! A major victory for lyricists such as him. So today's takeaway is to think about what work is valuable, what is invisible, what is seen and not seen, and most importantly, about the art of production, the art of making a baby. ART, artificial reproductive technology. In the next episode, we will look at surrogacy and related concepts of producer and product in the commercial surrogacy industry. Until then, let me quote what Akhtar said in Parliament. एक दिन आएगा जब हमारी सुनी जाएगी, एक दिन आएगा जब हमें भी अपना अधिकार मिलेगा. Akhtar and his mulk got their rights. What about women and theirs? Did you like the show? Share it with your friends and your neighbors. Till the next episode, this is me, Priya Mirza, signing out.
Hello. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, Varun is joined by Anupam Gurani, the Chief Marketing Officer for Lead. He breaks down the school edtech sector for us. On The Longest Constitution, Priya delves into intellectual property rights and the sexual reproductive autonomy of women. On Press Decode, Sarah Vagda and Prafulla engage in a debate on representation and discuss how we see race and religion. On Say No to Drama, Chitna slices through the drama around fights in relationships and how long they should last. Is it immoral to have feelings for someone else after you're happily married? On Hans Vani, hear the story, Tasavvur-e-Jana, about a woman's dilemma with love. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. It really helps us. Don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms that you're listening to. And also remember, you can check us out on YouTube at www.ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and HDFC Life Insurance. Thank you so much for making this possible.
सफर, रास्ते, मंजिल और मुकाम अक्सर ये हमसे कुछ कहना चाहते हैं, पर हम हैं कि अपनी रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में इन्हें सुनने से कतराते हैं। नमस्ते दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है केशव चतुर्वेदी और मैं आपको ले चलूंगा कुछ ऐसे सफर पर जहां आपको एक नया नजरिया मिलेगा सफर और मंजिलों को देखने का। आइए इन किस्से कहानियों में डूब जाएं। हर मंगलवार और शुक्रवार